All right, so let's go ahead and get started as more people start joining. Welcome everybody. My name is Cole Simcoe, work for Making Sense International, and I am the Communications and Event Coordinator for YP2LE. So I'd like to welcome you from all over the world. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening. To a YP2LE Learning Network webinar series. This webinar will be introducing the Ultimate Dialogue Adventure. So with that, I'm going to get started with a couple of introductory slides and some housekeeping for you all. So just briefly, we'll go over quickly the agenda. So we'll do some introductions here in the morning, and then we'll do a couple of background slides into what the Ultimate Dialogue Adventure is. And then we'll kind of move on to how to use the pathway, what we've learned later on in the session. We'll do some breakout groups there. So when we get to that portion of the webinar, we'll go ahead and explain how that's going to work. And then we'll have time at the end to do some audience Q&A and reflections. So if you'd like, make sure you have your questions ready then, and we'll do a quick closeout at around 10. Briefly, I wanted to talk about PYD framework and YP2LE. It's a USAID funded project that's based on positive youth development approach. For those of you that do not know, the positive youth development approach, as we define it, is youth being able to obtain skills, assets, meaning the ability to basically leverage those assets through agency and be able to contribute to positive change for themselves and their communities. And most importantly, one of the principles of PYD, as defined by the graphic you see on your screen, is youth being surrounded by an enabling environment that supports them, whether it be their government, their community, or their parents. Our learning network is a reflection of the approach that you see on your screen. We have evolved throughout the project, so this is actually the refreshed network, which is YP2LE. So some of you may have been familiar with the previous network, which is YP. So please go online to visit us at youthpower.org /positive youth development to learn a little bit more about that. Additionally, we wanted to talk a little bit about YP2LE and sustainable systems change. YP2LE aims to achieve systems change via integration of positive youth development principles and frameworks. We're combining PYD evidence building, stakeholder engagement, knowledge transfer, and application of learning to construct high quality, impactful, and sustainable youth programs. The program activities include the Learning Network, as I mentioned before, as a key component. In addition to webinars, the Learning Network also offers communities of practice, which you can join at youthpower.org. And if you are a young changemaker, we invite you to join us on youthlead.org. So today's webinar is actually the 6th that we've held on the YP2LE platform and is offered as part of our Learning Network series. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to our speakers today. We've got Lisa and Fiona on. So please, Lisa and Fiona, feel free to introduce yourself. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let Fiona take over for us.
Thanks, Cole, and good morning and good evening to our audience dialing in from across the world, and good afternoon from a very cloudy London. I've seen some greetings from Jordan, Sierra Leone, the US, and Indonesia. Keep them coming. We love to hear where you're from and what you're interested in gaining from this webinar. Welcome. Today we'll be introducing the Ultimate Dialogue Adventure, and thank you to YouthPower too for hosting us today. As Cole mentioned, my name is Fiona, and together with my colleague Lisa, we would like to introduce the Institute for Global Change's new learner-centered pathway, provide some information on how you can use it in formal and non-formal education settings, integrate it into existing programs or learning, and also share some of the lessons we have learned during the development of this platform. A little bit about myself. I'm a project manager with the Tony Blair Institute's flagship education program, Generation Global. I focus on the Middle East and North Africa, and also lead on a USAID funded program in Lebanon called WADA, which aims to evaluate the efficacy of youth dialogue in identifying bias and increasing tolerance. Lisa, would you like to say hello and introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks, Fiona. Just a few words, and thanks, Cole, and thanks, YouthPower, for having us here today. I'm very excited to be in all of your presence, just looking at the chat and seeing some of the incredibly big things that you're all up to, and really, putting forward global citizenship education and leadership and empowerment with youth around the globe. So very excited to talk with you today. Again, my name is Lisa Petro. I am the Senior Education Advisor for Generation Global. I focus a lot on the Americas, and really just here to talk with you about the educational architecture of this wonderful tool that we're going to share, and brainstorm, ideate, and of course, answer any questions that you have. So thanks a lot. Fiona, back over to you.
Thanks a lot, Lisa. So to begin with, I wanted to share a bit of background on how the Ultimate Dialogue Adventure emerged. Oh, let's go back here. From our existing flagship education program at the Institute. So Generation Global was established in 2009 and has been implemented in over 30 countries in MENA, Asia, Europe, and the Americas. The program aims to equip young people between the ages of 12 and 17 with global citizenship education and dialogue skills. So these skills would include critical thinking, active listening, global communication, questioning, and reflection. Generation Global enables students to both learn and practice these skills with global peers via video conferences and online dialogue. To date, we have worked with over 500,000 students, trained over 15,000 teachers, and have delivered more than 3,800 classroom video conferences. Our resources are recognized as best practice by UNESCO and others. We have partnered with governments in Italy, Jordan, and Australia, amongst others, and an independent evaluation of the program showed that students who participated in the program showed significant improvements in open-mindedness. Enter the coronavirus pandemic and the significant disruption to students, teachers, and just about everyone else's lives. By March last year, over 1 billion students were out of school as a result of COVID-19. Countries were going into lockdowns, Generation Global curricula were not being taught in the classroom anymore, and most of our activities were suspended. However, we wanted to expand access to a simplified online version of Generation Global direct to students in this time of need. And we wanted to respond to education stakeholders that were seeking support in adapting their education systems to meet these new needs during the pandemic. And so the Institute responded by producing an online version of Generation Global direct to students. What I would like to do now, because we have this lovely video, which probably introduces the program better than I can. So I'm going to go out of this presentation and make sure that you can all hear. And show you this video, which introduces the program. Lisa, can I ask you, if the sound doesn't play, if you can just let me know. Thanks.
Sure.
For 1 billion learners across the world affected by disrupted education. Now more than ever, students need access to safe and inclusive learning spaces to build intercultural relationships and develop skills for global citizenship. To support students in this time of great need, Generation Global has created the Ultimate Dialogue Adventure, a free online learning pathway for students ages 13 to 17, designed to connect young people all over the globe. The Ultimate Dialogue Adventure provides a fun and exciting way for students to learn the skills of dialogue, including global communication, active listening, critical thinking, questioning, and reflection. Explore important contemporary topics including human rights and inequality, climate change, fake news, and social media, as well as education. Adventurers will also interact with peers from 30+ countries across 5 continents. Participate in dialogue forums and video conferences. Gain a greater knowledge of different cultures and global issues. Earn experience points, badges, and fun titles. Created for optimum engagement and interaction, the Ultimate Dialogue Adventure is available to young people everywhere and accessible on any internet-enabled device, including those that work on low bandwidths. What are you waiting for? Sign up now for the Ultimate Dialogue Adventure at adventure.generation.global and share with your learning community today.
Hi, so that was the video. I'm just trying to get back to the actual presentation now. Sorry about that. And then I will reshare my screen. So to summarize, the Ultimate Dialogue Adventure is a self-directed student pathway for use online at home. It was designed and developed in partnership with DSIN, who are a leading digital design and development agency. And the first iteration was launched in July, so 3 months within an inception for students and teachers to use at home. So what I'm going to do now is reshare my screen. And then we can continue. So what I'd like to do now is go into a little bit more detail of what you heard in the video. So the audience are 13 to 17-year-olds. In this webinar, you'll often hear me refer to students and teachers, but I think with this platform, what we wanted to do is actually include all young people whose education has been disrupted or paused because of COVID or other reasons. And this includes some of the young people who have already participated in the Generation Global program. What are the principles we took into account when developing and iterating the Ultimate Dialogue Adventure? We wanted to ensure that the pathway was accessible and inclusive to those of different backgrounds and needs, that it was available on different devices, such as mobile phones, and drawing on our experiences with Generation Global, that it was able to work regardless of the quality of the internet connection. We also gamified the content so that young people could learn dialogue skills in a fun and engaging way. Our participants are able to collect experience points, badges, and certificates on their journey to becoming what we call dialogue masters. I'll be talking about these and other features in a little bit more detail when we head into the breakout rooms later and explore what needs to be considered when developing remote learning tools for young people. So this is where we are now. This is a map showing students registered around the world currently, and you can see one of the dialogue characters in the top right-hand side that pops up in the Ultimate Dialogue Adventure. To date, we have reached over 3,300 registered users from over 33 countries. Now what I would like to do is hand over to Lisa to explain the Pathways model for learning. And just a reminder before we do that, to use the chat function to ask any questions you might have, and we will get to those either in the breakout rooms or in the Q&A. And we will also share these slides after the presentation. So Lisa, go ahead when you're ready.
Thanks, Fiona. Would you mind just advancing the slide? Thank you so much. So talking a little bit about the educational framework, we knew that we needed to develop a tool that was inclusive, that was accessible, and that really demonstrated a lot more reach than what we may have been able to execute previously in person. And so obviously, as most of the world, turning our attention to the technology and thinking about, what is that goal? What are the things that we really want to support our students in developing by participating online in dialogue? So really what it came down to is we knew we wanted to support students in becoming global citizens, and that they were capable of fostering more positive and inclusive attitudes towards diversity and difference. And we knew we wanted to do that through the skills and experiences of intercultural dialogue. So that became our primary focus. Fiona, if you would just advance. Now, as I mentioned, being that one of our big goals was inclusivity, accessibility, and reach, we certainly wanted to make sure we fell under the umbrella of United Nations Sustainable Development Goal 4.7, which is quality education. So we did that in a variety of different ways, certainly supporting students in acquiring the knowledge that they need to be active participants in the world, but also the skills that they can go forward and promote some of these topics that we're supporting them in discussing and dialoguing about, so that they're able to really be part of sustainable development, inclusivity, peace, nonviolence, and again, ultimately that global citizenship element. Fiona, if you would just, thank you. So how do we do that? What is the approach? Well, we looked at a lot of different learning models, including the one that we currently have for dialogue. And we really found a home inside of UNESCO's Global Citizenship Education Framework in terms of how they're approaching the learner. So we looked at three primary elements of the learner. First, their cognitive development. We wanted students to be able to learn the skills of dialogue and explore global issues through this experience of communication. And then we wanted to see, well, how does that really influence the behavioral element of learning? And so we want them to be able to take those skills, take that knowledge, and use it through dialogue to build relationships with one another. So it's a social behavior, and to really build on those intercultural connections, focusing on the connectivity. And then lastly, we wanted to see, okay, well, how does this take care of the whole child and really hone in on the socio-emotional development of a child? And so we saw that through this cognitive development, through these behavioral and attitudinal shifts, we really are able to foster and develop attitudes for global citizenship in a young person. Fiona, if you wouldn't mind just going forward, thanks. So then we can get pretty specific here. Okay, well, what are the learning outcomes specifically from a student, a young person that's in this program, that's participating, using this tool as a resource? What are those learning outcomes that we want to see? So first, we really want to make sure that students understand those 5 core skills of dialogue, that they're familiar with what they are, that they understand what are those key actions that demonstrate those 5 core skills, and that they can go ahead and practice those actions to exemplify the skills of dialogue. So you'll see we have things like global communication, active listening, critical thinking, asking questions, and reflection as those foundational skills. And then the practice of that would be things like appreciating and acknowledging one another, sharing authentically and deeply about ourselves, our perspectives, our experiences, asking questions, challenging people respectfully when we disagree with them, and then reflecting on that process of learning and that experience of dialogue. From there, we know that students can really absorb and gain a greater knowledge of different cultures. They can do that through content, through topics on global issues, but they can also do that through the dialogue and hearing the stories of one another and self-reflecting, of course, on their own stories. In that, there's a space for them to really develop an intercultural connection, to develop relationships with peers, with people who are different from them all over the world. And then inside of those relationships and externally facing, they can really demonstrate those positive and inclusive attitudes for diversity and for global connection. Fiona, if you wouldn't mind. So just to give you a little bit of an idea, especially for the teachers and practitioners in our group today, here's a short curricular map about how we sort of meet that. So you see that we've got those global skills, those dialogic skills at the top, global communication, asking questions, etc. And then in that, we have those very specific objectives that encompass the key actions of that core skill. And we can see where students are practicing that inside of this adventure. So on the left column, we have a variety of methods and ways for students to engage with those skills. So for example, we have modules, learning modules, which are short 20-minute bodies of information, diverse content and interactions, quizzes and games where students can get a foundational knowledge of what dialogue is, and also specific global topics, issues like fake news or climate change or the rights of girls and women. And then we have more active spaces for students to practice those actions, those skills. And so we have dialogue spaces, meaning basically forums. So when a student completes a topic that they've learned about, they can then go into a live forum where they can talk with their peers from all over the world, similarly to a blog or a social media thread. And we also have video conferences. They can book themselves into live video conferences with other peers from all over the world to discuss those issues and to dialogue and practice those skills. Fiona, if you wouldn't mind, just going to the next one. So lastly, and I'll spend some more time in the breakout session talking with you about how to use the Ultimate Dialogue Adventure as a tool, as a teaching resource. But here's a couple of really powerful ways, methodologies really, that you can take advantage of this tool. So first, this could be something extracurricular. If you're a community organization, if you are a teacher and you want to gather a group of students after class for extra credit, anything like that, you can use this extracurricularly. It can be used to create clubs. For example, you could have like a dialogue club or a global citizenship club. It could also be used in terms of, you know, external stuff, focusing in on digital citizenship groups and committees. And so this can be a way for students to really practice participating in those kinds of extracurricular groups. Could also be an enrichment activity. So as I mentioned, if you have students that you really want to stretch, you can assign them things, you know, projects to be able to participate in this, giving them guiding questions to explore, to use this tool to explore those guiding questions. You can use it in a blended learning way. This is especially if you're a teacher, so you can take some of our more passive products like activities that you can do in class as a group, and then you can blend it with this tool and the technology to really dig a little bit deeper and explore different dimensions of dialogue. Flipped classroom is a great one, and this is the one I'm going to just share briefly with you about in our breakout session. So certainly sending students away to complete tasks and participate in this online journey in their own time, and then coming back together to reflect and scaffold and build on that learning when you're in class time. And then lastly, independent learning. So if you have students that are really working on competency development and you want to support them in a path of mastery for intercultural communication, let's say, this can be a way that they can independently set goals and milestones, and you can help them set those goals and milestones to develop different layers of skills for a mastery in intercultural communication. So Fiona, I'll just turn it back over to you. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Lisa. So to recap, we've shared some information on what the Ultimate Dialogue Adventure is, how we approached its development, content, and learning path. Now what I would like to do is share with you some slides on how it actually works and how you might go about registering. So when you first visit the site at adventure.generation.global, you are welcomed and invited to discover how to become a dialogue master, so that you can communicate with young people from all over the world, learn about cultural differences and similarities, and build intercultural connections. You are presented with a map of your learning journey, which is the top left-hand side image. And it also includes a safeguarding video you're required to watch to help protect you along the way. The map visualizes the learning dojo, where you will discover the skills of dialogue, the different learning modules, the badges and experience points you can earn, and the activities that you can unlock as you progress through the adventure. At this point, just a reminder that the Ultimate Dialogue Adventure is aimed at young people between the ages of 13 and 17, and that to safeguard the online space. Oh, my mother's just calling. Sorry about that. Adults cannot directly register on the pathway. What those outside the age range can do, however, is view the safeguarding video and work through the introductory module. So you can use that to get a flavor of the learning pathway. There's also a separate teacher companion guide, which provides resources and materials for teachers to integrate the Ultimate Dialogue Adventure into any learning community. So once you graduate from the introductory module, you will be able to see the dashboard and options for practicing and strengthening your skills. This practice in turn contributes to the unlocking of titles, topics, and dialogue spaces. For example, on the right-hand side of the slide, you can see the first set of characters or titles that you could earn, as well as a helpful guide on what it means to have earned that title. So for example, if you are a dialogue toucan, you should be able to challenge someone in a way that is respectful and constructive if you disagree with them. These are some of the other interesting character titles which are part of the gamified learning pathway, and you can earn as you progress through the adventure. And here are some of the globally relevant topics which you can learn about. These include content in a variety of different media formats. As I mentioned earlier, we wanted to make sure that the content was fun, engaging, accessible, inclusive. So we have text as well as video, which are able to, and these are able to be played in low resource contexts. Once you have learned some of the dialogue skills and earned some XP, some experience points, you can apply these in the pathway's dialogue spaces. The dialogue spaces allow participants to discuss with each other some of the pertinent issues raised in the topics they have learned about. So if I go to the previous slide, we have dialogue spaces related to these different topics. So at the moment, for example, there are 632 young people from 10 countries engaged on the topic of human rights. And one of the interesting dialogues I saw this morning emerged from a student from India asking, how does the COVID-19 crisis affect the rights of women and girls, or the women and girls in your life? Young people can respond by reflecting, asking another question, challenging or sharing, and are prompted to do so in the dialogue space. The dialogue space itself is moderated by trained Generation Global alumni, and there is a language filter in place which allows us to immediately flag any inappropriate content. Another activity on the Ultimate Dialogue Adventure are the video conferences, where again, young people can connect in scheduled, live, facilitated dialogues on the topics they have worked through on the Ultimate Dialogue Adventure. So topics such as education, climate change, hate speech, identity, fake news, and social media. And then I'm just going to go back to the registration slide. Again, when young people register, we wanted to make sure that we prioritize safeguarding. So young people between the ages of 13 and 17 can register, but we also ask them to provide a parent or a guardian's name. And this is all, these dialogue spaces then all happen in that safe space. Let's save online space. All right, so before going into the breakout rooms, what I would like to do is a poll, a quick poll, and ask you, how are you engaging young people in discussion and dialogue during the pandemic? So I'll give about half a minute. The options are in person, in class, WhatsApp groups, telephone. Telephone includes SMS, Google Meet or Google Hangouts, Teams, maybe you're sharing paper-based materials or not at all. So I can see about 2/3 of you have voted. So I encourage the rest of our participants to please share their votes and give you about another 10 seconds. Okay, what I'll do now, briefly share results. Okay, so it looks like a lot of you, 62%, are using Zoom, closely followed by WhatsApp groups, in person or in class, and Teams, as well as Google Meet. So some really interesting results there. Thank you for sharing. I'm going to move these over here and then briefly introduce the breakout rooms. So we have 2 breakout rooms today. One of them focuses on ideas, so exploring ideas that you might have for using the Ultimate Dialogue Adventure with young people. So Lisa will be leading that room, and she'll go into a little bit more detail around the different techniques or the different ways of integrating the Ultimate Dialogue Adventure, which she spoke about briefly already. And then the second breakout room is around sharing some of the principles and lessons learned from developing the dialogue adventure, but also hearing from you what you think are important considerations when developing remote learning tools. So I'm going to ask Cole to set up the rooms, and you will be able to self-select which room you would like to be in. Yes, Lisa?
There's a couple requests in the chat. I think that the poll is in the way and people can't read the questions. So if you could close the box.
There you go.
Ah, thank you.
Okay, perfect. So as Fiona was mentioning, so we have 2 breakout rooms. The first, I'll give you guys a second to read the question again, will be led by Lisa, and then the second will be led by Fiona. So they are self-selecting breakout rooms. So once I open the rooms, you guys will have about 15 minutes. We have maybe a little less time to have some discussions and kind of dig deeper into these topics. So like I said, there will be a pop-up coming up on your screen, so please feel free to choose. The first one is named Ideas for Using UDA or Ultimate Dialogue Adventure with Youth. The second question on here is Developing Remote Learning Tools. So take a second, I'm gonna go ahead and open up the rooms and feel free to select which one you're interested in attending. Just giving everybody a little bit of time to join back in. I think everyone's actually back from their breakout rooms. So guys, you can't see me. So welcome back, everybody. Wanted to go ahead and open up. We have about 5 minutes left. So there were some questions that we collected from the chat previously. I also wanted to let people feel free to ask questions in the chat. I know some of you may have asked these questions in the breakout group. So Fiona, Lisa, please feel free to elaborate a little bit more. But one of the questions that we had received earlier in the chat is, what languages is the platform available in to youth?
Thanks, Cole, and welcome back, everyone. And I'm very glad to see some familiar faces logged into this webinar today that I've just noticed. So the platform itself is currently available in English only. However, what we have done, and I mentioned this in the breakout room, is make the teacher companion guides available in different languages. So for Spanish and Arabic, for example. Thank you.
And another question that came up through the chat for you guys is the contextualization or kind of adaptation to local context. So if the platform is adaptable and it has been adapted, I guess, across a more global context for use.
Thanks, Cole. So in terms of the content, so in terms of the skills of dialogue and the foundational skills of dialogue, that sort of has become something that we've universally designed in the ways in that they're learning that. That can transfer differently across cultural contexts, certainly using the technology in different ways. But that is sort of what it is. When it comes to the content of the global topics, what we've done, and again, you know, when you're talking about creating something online, you're really at the mercy of the technology and the limitations of the technology, right? So what we've done there is that we've curated content from all over the world. So a student will see themselves represented in one way or the other in some piece of content in all of those, the diverse topics that we have to offer. And a lot of those more active pieces of content are translated into other languages. So even though the dialogue is happening in English, you can get video transcripts in a variety of languages and infographics, etc. So that does have access.
Thank you, Lisa. I wanted to open up, I know we only have a couple minutes left here. We did have a kind of takeaway poll that we were going to launch, and I wanted to make sure that I open the floor back up to Lisa and Fiona if there's any more points you wanted to bring back to the whole group from the breakout sessions.
Thanks, Cole. I think there were some very good points made during the breakout session, one of which relates to the challenges around actually accessing devices, electricity supply, internet supply. And I think this is something that we really try to take into account with the development of the Ultimate Dialogue Adventure. So making sure you don't lose any progress if the internet cuts, for example, making sure you can access it on a mobile phone. So being very aware, also from our experience with Generation Global, that not everyone has access to a stable internet supply. The other point I just wanted to raise, Zena asked a really good question related to content. So how did we decide on the topics? I think a lot of the topics emerged from what we were doing with Generation Global. However, we also wanted to make sure that the topics were topical and explore some of that intersectionality with what was going on with the pandemic. So how was COVID-19 impacting on human rights? How is COVID-19 impacting on climate change? Was there anything we could learn from that? How was it impacting on identity? So just making sure that we're looking at different layers to different topics, and as well as, you know, doing the focus group discussions with young people, they also fed into what would be relevant, what's relevant to them in their daily lives. Lisa?
Yeah, I think the only thing, and I answered back to Sandhya in the chat, is that this is essentially a self-directed pathway for students. So as long as they're 13 to 17, they can sign up for themselves. They can follow this pathway to develop the skills of dialogue and participate with peers. They can book themselves into video conferences, and it's built in both ways, where a student can be self-directed and a teacher can leverage it in the classroom as a tool, as an educational tool. So
perfect. So we've just about a minute over here. So I wanted to, Fiona, do you want to do we want to launch the last poll just to do some closeout, and I can take us to the next slide?
Great, thanks. Right, so I will launch our last poll for today, which asks about one thing that you'll be doing after this webinar. So you should be able to see that poll now. Will you try the introductory module? Will you email us for more information? Cole has helpfully shared our contact details in the chat, and they are available on the slide. Will you tell a friend about the Ultimate Dialogue Adventure? Or will you invite the young people in your life to register? So I can see about half of you have voted. So we'll keep that going for another 10 seconds. If you would like to share your details. And again, the slides will be shared after the presentation, and our contact details are in there as well as in the chat. And you're welcome to reach out and ask any more questions that you may have. Okay, I'm going to stop the poll now. And quickly share the results. It's about an even split between the different options, which is great. And we really look forward to hearing from you again soon. And I'll hand over to Cole again, I think. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes. So I just wanted to take a moment, say thank you. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Fiona. And thank you for everyone who joined us today. I hope this was a fruitful discussion, and I hope that you will, as the polling indicates, take some of this information forward and apply it to your own programming and learning. As Fiona mentioned, the slides and the recording of the presentation will be shared on the youthpower.org website. Just one more note, on youthpower.org, please feel free to visit youthpower.org and youthly.org if you are a young change maker for more information to keep up to date on webinars such as this. We do have currently 3 communities of practice running that may be of interest to people, one surrounding gender, one for youth engagement, and then we have a business, entrepreneurship, and private sector engagement community of practice as well. Upcoming, so if you join the website, you'll also see that we'll have a higher education community of practice and a youth systems community of practice. So please feel free, like I said, to reach out to us via email, either to myself, Lisa, and Fiona. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure today, and I hope you all enjoyed yourself. Thank you all for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of your day, wherever you are. Thank you. Bye-bye.